good afternoon, and hello from Washington, D.C. With your AAUW policy team led by the fierce and fearless Kate Nielsen. And I'm Kim Churches, CEO of AAUW. We'll be talking a lot today about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy. She passed almost 2 weeks ago, and today we'll be talking about what her passing means, what her legacy has meant for our mission, our vision, and our values at AAUW, and what to expect next as we look to filling her seat on the Supreme Court, the election ahead, and so much more. So with that, I am going to kick things off. Kate, Letty, and Robin, thank you so much for joining us today. And I should note, we're also recording this. So if you have AAUW colleagues who were unable to join us today and friends, this will be recorded and placed on our 2020 convening page and access on the membership page on the AAUW national website, which can be found at aauw.org. But let's talk a little bit about the loss of one of our nation's most beloved, actually one of the most on the planet beloved role models, an iconic feminist who just refused to see barriers and boundaries in her path. She was a pioneer, not just in her own life, but really in thinking about all of our lives and for generations to come. And she fought for so many of the principles that we hold exceedingly dear at AAUW. She really epitomizes all that we are attempting to strive for in advancing gender equity for women and girls yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's why in 1999, AAUW was so proud to honor her with the AAUW Achievement Award, and all of us have been mourning her passing. I know a couple of my colleagues have been either solo or with their families at candlelight vigils, standing out on the steps and the lawn around the Supreme Court. I went for 2 nights, one night with our niece who is graduating from college in the worst economy our nation has seen in almost 100 years, and with my 12-year-old daughter who considers Sonia Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg to be personal role models for her. She keeps a bobblehead of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on her desk still, and it was exceedingly moving to be here in Washington. But for those of you who were not able to join us, I also brought 2 masks as my show and tell for today. I've been wearing this one of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you can see, since her passing, and I alternate it with this one, which we will be talking about as well, because part of what AAUW has been so focused on is getting out the vote and ensuring that there's an exceedingly large amount of voter education available to all of us so that we can exercise our voices through our vote. But even before Ruth Bader Ginsburg joined the Supreme Court, she was already a shrewd, clever litigator, always supported by her beloved husband, who championed her every step of her career, from education all the way to the Supreme Court. And she did really advance women's rights in many non-traditional ways as well. She actually was a pioneer in establishing that the 14th Amendment, which promises equal protection under law, pertained to discrimination based on sex. But to expand the ways in which the courts interpreted equal protection, she tackled sex discrimination that also affected men. And why do you think she would do that? Because she knew that if she only confronted the inequalities facing women, men wouldn't listen, and it would fall on deaf ears. So she took the opposite strategy to really show that we can all be faced with sexual discrimination. Once she was confirmed to the Supreme Court, and I know so many of you remember, she became a titan of justice, penning so many opinions that really are at the heart of what we're working on at AAUW and safeguarding the rights for so many. She also, as many of us know and have read, issued incredibly fiery dissents when the court went a way that she was fiercely not in agreement with. And, she laid roadmaps really for future jurists, for legislators, for academics, for policy wonks, and for all of us just as citizens to make sure that her important legal theories were advanced. So you can honestly match whatever the notorious RBG was doing directly to just about everything that we're working on here, from pay equity to access to healthcare, to voting rights, to expanding LGBTQIA rights, to upholding Title IX. And she faced discriminations that I faced, you faced, we've all faced in education, in our careers, as a woman, as a parent, and had to try and tackle those over and over again. Kate reminded me of one example of this that I really did want to share. It was a case pertaining to the strip search of a 13-year-old girl, and her perspective was unique from male colleagues on the bench. And it was very clear because, as she stated, quote, "They have never been a 13-year-old girl. It's a very sensitive age for a girl." And I don't think that my colleagues, some of them, quite understood. And she never forgot the human touch in all that Ruth Bader Ginsburg really worked on in her life. And she always remembered to be a humanist, a fierce feminist, and to care for all human beings. So I'm also just going to say, as I've been reading a lot of comments from former law clerks and those who knew her really well. And in her chambers, she always kept up a quote from Deuteronomy that said, "Justice, justice, thou shalt pursue." And pursue she did with every part of her bones, her body, and her brains. And so I'm delighted to have Kate Nielsen join us first today to talk through some of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy and how we proceed forward. So Kate, thanks for joining us today, and thank you so much to you and your team for all that you're doing in this exceedingly uncertain year. It's great to be with you.
Thanks, Kim. Great to be here, and thanks for your leadership in good times and in bads.
So tell us in your words, what made RBG's legacy so noteworthy?
Well, first, I just want to acknowledge, and building off of your comments, Kim, that she was just a lovely, warm human being, I think, above all else. And the tributes from her clerks are so moving. If you haven't read them yet, I reiterate Kim's point. They're really lovely. Don't read them right before you're supposed to speak with other people, because then you'll cry and that will make you look ugly. But also, it's real in what we're going through now, and we really lost a titan. Justice Ginsburg, in so many ways, really established the rights that so many of us take for granted. And not only did she establish the current rights that we appreciate, but she really laid out the roadmap for expanding those and keeping them going and getting more rights as we move forward. Early in her career, she was the architect of the first case where the court ever applied the Equal Protection Clause to discrimination on the basis of sex. And that was in a case called Reed versus Reed. Anybody who studies constitutional law or sex discrimination, that's going to be the first case that you read about. And she was the one who sort of laid the groundwork for it. Shortly after that case, she directed the ACLU Women's Rights Project. And she continued that work until she was appointed to the federal bench in 1980. And while in that role, she litigated 6 times, or she appeared as a litigator 6 times before the Supreme Court. And continued this process of establishing the jurisprudence around sex discrimination. And as Kim mentioned, she attacked it from a unique angle, trying to establish that sex discrimination pertains to both men and women, and that we all can be hurt by it. So there's a line of cases, several of them having to do with widowers who were not able to receive equal benefits because the spouse who died was a woman, and just sort of tackling and carving out rights by looking at cases through that lens. And it leaves us with the law that we have today because of her hard work.
Thanks, Kate. So I mentioned this in my opening, but talk to us a little bit about her dissents, because she always made such extraordinary statements in her dissents that are sometimes remembered more than the actual decision of the court. So can you take us through a couple of those?
Absolutely. And I wish I brought my dissent collar. That's what she was known for. And I think if I was wearing that, I would be even more powerful today, just with that inspiration oozing out. But I do want to mention that I think she was really known for her dissents because they were fiery, and she sometimes read them from the bench, which just added an extra oomph to them. and really emphasized her frustration with the majority. But it wasn't just a statement that she was making with these dissents. She was really laying a roadmap for future legal opinions and for legislative responses. So her sharp, critical legal mind was laying out how we could fight back. And I think the best example of that is the Lilly Ledbetter case. She was in the dissent in that 5-4 decision. She said that the way that the court interpreted the law was a really, quote, cramped interpretation that neglected the insidiousness of pay discrimination. And because of the way that she wrote her dissent, Lilly Ledbetter was in some ways able to get justice. She never was on her particular case, but she has a lasting legacy with the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act that was signed into law in 2009. Another dissent that Justice Ginsburg penned was in Gonzalez v. Carhart. This was the decision that prohibited the safe and necessary medical procedure, and it pertained to the so-called partial birth abortion ban. And in her dissent, as with so many of them, she looked at the real-world consequences of what the court was saying. And she said, the solution that the court approves then is not to require doctors to inform women accurately and adequately of the different procedures and their attendant risks. Instead, the court deprives women of the right to make an autonomous choice, even at the expense of their safety. So she was looking at how this was really impacting people and weighing in on that and voicing her displeasure with the majority. Another really important decision that is more important today than ever as we all look to cast ballots in the upcoming election, or many of us probably already have. But it was in Shelby County v. Holder. And this was about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Again, in a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that a section of the act was unconstitutional. And that section created what's called a coverage formula, which was used to identify states with a history of unlawful and racially discriminatory election laws. And they needed more focused remedies. And it called for preclearance or oversight of those states. And the court threw this practice out and really undid a lot of the important protections of that act. And in her dissent, Justice Ginsburg said, throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. And it's just such a great quote. It gets to the heart of the issue and just does such a fine job of sort of striking back against the ridiculousness that was that decision. And then just one other dissent that I want to note was in Gratz v. Bollinger. And this case is about affirmative action. And she, again, looking at the real world implications of an admissions policy at the University of Michigan, the court struck down the policy on a 6-3 decision. But she said that the majority stance would be more fitting were a nation free of the vestiges of rank discrimination long reinforced by law. But we are not, far distant from an overtly discriminatory past, and the effects of centuries of law-sanctioned inequality remain painfully evident in our communities and schools. This is a case that I've long known of. I actually studied while at the University of Michigan, but I think in the current moment that we're in, her words are just so powerful and prescient in terms of this is not history, this is present, and we need to continue to work to address the problems that we're experiencing. So those are some of the highlights of the dissents that she penned that were so powerful and I think guide so much of the work that we do.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate, so much. And it was great to kind of go through those important cases with you as we reflect back on all that she has accomplished, even when she wasn't able to convince her fellow jurists to go the way that she did, but why her dissent still matters and in our work ahead. And Lilly Ledbetter is a great example of that, as you said as well. So her passing is leaving a huge hole for all of us in so many ways, but it's also a hole of making 9 become 8 on the Supreme Court. And that's a space to be filled. The president and the Senate they're certainly rushing to move. It's their constitutional right to do so. and they are able to move quickly. So can you talk a little bit about why this has become so acrimonious, and really an unprecedented process that we're in the middle of right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kim. So there is a standard process that you move through when there is a vacancy on the court. The vacancy was created when Justice Ginsburg died. And then the next step after that is a nomination. And Trump nominated Judge Amy Coney Barrett last weekend to fill the role. After that, the next step in the process is a thorough vetting. As part of that, the Senate Judiciary Committee has a hearing, and then there's a full Senate vote. And it is not unprecedented to have a nominee as quickly as President Trump nominated Judge Barrett. Justices Scalia and Souter were each nominated 5 and 7 days, or 7 and 5 days respectively, after vacancy. But the average length is 65 days. So I would say that this is fast, but not unheard of. However, what is unheard of and what AAUW has a real issue with is the speed with which they're proposing to move through the process of vetting the nominee. So this process includes meeting with senators. It includes reviewing her record, which was just released, full record a few days ago, a search by the FBI, all of these various steps to make sure that the person who is filling a lifetime appointment is up to the job. We don't go through getting a new job without being thoroughly interviewed. And so the average time between creating a vacancy and hearing is 113 days. And the fastest this happened is 55 days, and that was Justice Souter. And right now, the timeline that's been proposed is a 22-day sprint. So 33 days shorter than the fastest it's been in the last several decades. So that's the area that I have issue with, and I think a lot of people are taking issue with in this process, is just making sure that the person who's been nominated is fit for the job, understanding their record, understanding how they're going to perform on the bench, what issues are at stake, and making sure that they're up to the job. So I think that that's really critical that it's done right. AAUW has always called for full and fair vetting of all judicial nominees.
Yeah, it's fast, and it's also, we're already, many of us, as you said in the beginning, are already voting. So it makes it, that's also causing, some anxious feelings among a lot of Americans, regardless of their political intents. And it's not, I just want to be really clear on here, it's absolutely legal and constitutionally okay to move forward. It is ensuring, exactly as you say, Kate, that we're fully vetting, because these are lifetime appointments. And there's been a lot of comments and newspaper articles and opinion pages of late of, what does lifetime appointment mean when we're all living to much riper ages today? It's been an interesting way as we look at our democracy, look at our Constitution in some of these examples we've seen over the last year or so. So, let's talk a little bit about, again, I just want to mention, because the other issue here of the election just being just a little over 4.5 weeks away, I have a couple neighbors here that have these giant signs with the countdown of days to the election, which is probably causing me more angst than any of us need. So we know there's nothing in the Constitution that limits the ability to confirm a justice, even though some senators implied this back in 2016. So talk to us a little bit about that, of what we had in 2016 versus 2020.
So I don't really want to dwell on the hypocrisy. I think we're all aware of the flip-flopping that different senators have done on this issue.
And I'd also just say, Kate, politics is about power here. It's not really always about precedent statements always, right? So, yeah.
Completely. And,
yeah, that's fine.
they're acting in the interest of their party.
Yeah.
And if the roles were flipped, I would anticipate much the same.
Yeah.
And, frankly, hypocrisy is not how AAUW makes its policy decisions. We make our decisions based upon the issues and what's at stake.
That's right.
And as Kim said, the election's already underway, especially with the increase in mail-in voting this year. Many people have already cast their ballots, and they're voting on the people who are considering the nomination right now. So as Kim said, well within their constitutional rights to do this, but it's, I would say, unseemly. And combined with the fact that this process is being rushed, and B, we need to acknowledge that we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, public health crisis, and the Senate has been unable to get through any legislation to help everyday Americans, but are all of a sudden prioritizing this. So I would call on the senators to think about what their priorities are right now, and focus on that. But also, as we're weighing in on whether or not these senators are doing a good job, they're weighing in on a lifetime appointment. And all of these things combined just make it such that it feels like the power is being taken away from everyday individuals to have their voice heard about the direction they'd like to see their country go. And there's just so much at stake. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But as both Kim and I have said, this is a lifetime appointment. We need to fully and fairly vet the person who's being considered for the job. And frankly, we've all heard the news, right? There's a potential that this election will be hotly contested and the court may weigh in on it. And that a critical decision about who the next president is may be made by someone who is put in place just days before the election concludes. And there's just a lot of different factors going on right now. And I feel that it should be in the hands of the people to weigh in on this election before someone is seated in this important role.
Thanks, Kate. So let's talk a little bit. Let's dive in. We've talked about the process. We've talked about where we are, where we could be, in the next 33 days. Let's talk to a little bit about the issues that are at stake. And I say that with a very important reminder to everyone participating in the webinar that we are fiercely nonpartisan, but that does not mean we are not values driven. And so that we at AAUW are assessing all of this not through a political lens, but through our values of what we stand for, of what we believe in around advancing equity. And so we start first with facts. We analyze the facts, and that includes the facts of the records of people being put up for lifetime appointments. So let's talk a little bit about why it's important who the next Supreme Court justice is, as we think really underneath the lens of our work at AAUW, and what issues are potentially at stake.
All of our issues. The Supreme Court has the potential to decide on so many of the issues that we care about, and the rights of women and families and men and all folks in this country. First and foremost, healthcare. On November 10th, the Supreme Court is slated to hear a challenge to the Affordable Care Act. So the next justice has the potential to hear that and weigh in on that. And especially during a pandemic, it is so critical that Americans have access to healthcare. So that's the first one I want to point out. The other is reproductive rights. Regardless of where you fall on the issue of choice, it is extremely likely that the next justice will have the opportunity to weigh in on the issue. And whether or not Roe v. Wade is upheld hangs in the balance. Beyond that, I took a look at the slate of cases that the court will be hearing over the next year, and there are already cases regarding arbitration, which matters deeply to workers' rights and employment law, and a case about this, or actually two cases about the statute of limitations on rape that occurs in the military. Beyond that, I expect over the next few years, continued challenges to voting rights and redistricting, especially with the census concluding, LGBTQ rights, and more employment matters, and of course, education.
So just a couple things, as you said, everything that we're essentially working on at AAUW, which is, I promise you, as we continue through this, we're also going to talk a bit about what we all can do individually as members at AAUW as well. So for those of you who watched the presidential debate the other night, you did hear President Trump speak about his nominee, Judge Barrett. So Kate, tell us a little bit about what do we know about Judge Barrett and her record. I've read a bunch. I'm sure a lot of our members on today's webinar have as well. How do we think she could, based on the precedent of her previous rulings, how could she move forward and rule on our own issues here at AAUW that we're fighting for every day?
So I'm going to talk about three different buckets that we have a sort of a substantial record from her to work from. I'm not going to sort of pontificate about how she might rule on other things, but those are going to fall into sort of labor and employment law, healthcare, and then education. So on the labor and employment law front and workers' rights, I just want to be clear about what AAUW stands for. So we advocate for pay equity and fairness in compensation and benefits, and equitable access and advancement in employment, including vigorous enforcement of employment anti-discrimination statutes. And the cases that Judge Barrett has ruled on and some of her writings, it appears that she has not demonstrated that she would uphold these values. So one case, the EOC versus Autozone, pertained to racial discrimination in the workplace, and she joined an opinion that found that the employer's ability to transfer employees based on their race could be upheld as long as the transfer was not otherwise adversely affect their employment opportunities or status. And the dissent in that case claimed that the majority opinion that Judge Barrett signed on to permitted a sort of separate but equal argument, so really setting us back. Another case dealt with age discrimination, and she found against a 58-year-old man who was passed over for a job in favor of a younger applicant with less experience. And then a third case in this line was against the food delivery service Grubhub, and Judge Barrett ruled against the drivers who claimed that the company failed to pay them overtime that they were entitled to. So this collection of cases suggests that she does not prioritize worker rights and flies in the face of what we stand for and what we advocate for. On the healthcare and reproductive rights front, I would also argue that her record is adverse to AAUW priorities. Again, laying out AAUW's position on this issue. We work to guarantee equality, individual rights, and social justice for a diverse society. We advocate for self-determination of one's reproductive health decisions and increased access to quality, affordable healthcare and family planning services, including expansion of patients' rights. So in this line, as far as healthcare goes, Judge Barrett has done some writing on this before she was on the federal bench. And she was critical of Chief Justice Roberts' decision, which upheld Congress's authority to enact large portions of the Affordable Care Act. She also critiqued the majority opinion in another case that weighed in on the ACA. And then when she was on faculty at Notre Dame, she was a member of Notre Dame's Faculty for Life. She has suggested that stare decisis, which is the principle of upholding decisions and the line of reasoning that has come before. She says it's diminished in controversial areas of law, suggesting that she would be interested in overturning Roe versus Wade, among other things. And she signed on to a, quote, statement of protest against an accommodation for employers regarding providing contraception for their employees through their health insurance. As far as opinions that she's actually penned, she joined 2 dissents pertaining to abortion rights. And both of those really fly in the face of established jurisprudence around the right to privacy and the right to abortion. So all of this suggests that she is opposed to AAUW's stance on healthcare and reproductive rights. Finally, the last piece I want to touch on is education and Title IX. During the Obama administration, there was regulations and guidance issued to help interpret Title IX, help schools uphold the rights of students to access an equal education. And she wrote an opinion going against those rules and regulations. And it was in a case called Doe versus Purdue University. She found in favor of a male student who sued Purdue after the school found him guilty of sexual assault and suspended him. And what's particularly problematic about this case is not just the outcome, but the logic that she laid out in it. In many previous decisions around these issues, courts have held the accused students' due process claims, but rejected their Title IX claims on grounds that the students had failed a sort of complicated series of legal tests that were first established in 1994. But Judge Barrett's opinion offered a different approach, and it will likely make it easier for accused students to bring civil litigation against the universities in a jury trial, undoing a lot of Title IX precedent and threatening equal access to education. So the record that she has seems to be in opposition to AAUW's values.
Thanks, Kate. That's a lot. And I know for a lot of our folks participating in today's webinar, you might want a couple of resources around this. So you can find in the chat box right now, my colleague Letty has really thankfully pasted in the link to my statement on Judge Barrett's nominations. So you can see a lot of what Kate talked through here and our statement here. Also, if you scroll up, you'll also see another page and resources on the website about the lasting legacy of RBG and what she meant to us on the court. Many of you are posting some really terrific questions in the Q&A, and I'm really grateful for it. We're going to cover, I was smiling as I was reading some of them because I know my friend Robin is going to be sharing some ideas for us here. And a couple things that I want to be really clear on. I work with these individuals that you're seeing on the screen with me today every day, but the only way I have seen or participated with them has been on this, my cell phone, or this being on my computer through Zoom. And we're still able to do a tremendous amount of work to prioritize what we all believe in, which is our mission and our vision of equity for all, really ensuring that we're moving forwards, not backwards. And so there's a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake in your own communities, at the state level, in Senate races, in the presidential election, obviously, and in this appointment to the Supreme Court. But there's also a lot more we can be doing, as we lead up to November 3rd, knowing that tens of thousands of humans have already cast their votes and I had to pick up a prescription today. And I was outside of my pharmacy and a woman was going, "Where's the ballot box? They said there was supposed to be a ballot box here. Have you seen it?" So people are actively voting every day right now. So let's talk with Robin a little bit, who's going to talk about your role, you as an AAUW member, my role here as a member and as staff here in your national office, and the ways that we can do things, because I know there's been a lot of talk of we haven't been able to work to advocate around voter education and getting out the vote in the same way because of the COVID-19 ongoing pandemic. But I think Robin's going to be able to share with us some of those ideas. So Robin, talk to us a little bit about what we can all do so that we can feel empowered to really work on behalf of our mission. Tell us a little bit more about how we're responding to all of this and what can we do kind of in the short term and the long term. And do we have like a couple of big asks we can ask of everybody participating in today's webinar? And thanks for being with us, Robin.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Robin Lucas. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Grassroots Advocacy Manager here. I just want to first start off with, I feel the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg as keenly as each of you, and I am profoundly proud to be working within such a committed community here at AAUW. RBG's perspective was that dissents are for the future age. Meaning that checks and balances are critical for our democracy, and dissent is a powerful method of contributing to building a just society and future. I personally take that as an important responsibility as an advocate for gender equity, and I hope that everyone here does as well. With that said, advocacy can take many forms, and AAUW honors the different skills that our community brings to their activism. In that light, we have developed 4 ways for you to engage in this fight for a just and fair Supreme Court. But first, I want to drive home why it's important that you engage. Our country must fight to ensure that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her successor, is a similarly strong advocate for women and families. And I'm talking directly to each and every person on this call. It is up to you. This is our court. This is the highest court in the land. It is the people's court, and it is up to us to speak up about it. To go over some resources, my colleague Letty is adding now some links in the chat for you to engage with. They will also be shared along with the webinar recording when that's posted later. First of 4 actions is contact your senators. The United States Senate's job is to work for the people, not only on our behalf, and communicating with your senator is critical to making sure that the system that we live in works, and every constituent bears this responsibility. We have posted our call to action that will prompt you through our system to send a letter to your own senators, and it only takes 2 minutes. The second action, you can write a letter to the editor. If you're like me and enjoy amplifying your messaging far and wide, somewhere like in the newspaper, then writing a letter to the editor or LTE is perfect for you. And LTE is a great way to educate and energize fellow advocates, reach elected officials, and spread the word about the Supreme Court vacancy and what is at stake. We'll have information like some example versions of what an LTE could look like, along with some key talking points, background information, and writing guide resources to fully support you in your effort. Third action, phone bank to connect other Americans with their senators. So if your strength as an advocate is best served through one-on-one interactions, phone banking is the activity for you. AAUW has partnered with coalition partner National Equality Action Team for phone banking. This connects volunteers like you with fellow Americans through a secure and private system where you can connect them on the call to their senators directly to leave messages or talk with staffers. Our page outlines what the process looks like, includes links to sign up, and of course, our talking points on why this engagement is important. And finally, the fourth action that you can take is to amplify all of this work on social media. We do live in an unusual year in 2020. Virtual engagement is more critical now than ever, and this is a really great way to engage with that. My consistent push in 2020 is to get as many of you online and active on social media as possible. This is truly an important avenue to engage in the conversation and make sure that your voice is heard. The page that this links to outlines key hashtags where this conversation is happening on social media, some basics for social media, some graphics and images you can include in your posts, and general templates for social media posts that you can copy, paste, and personalize yourself.
Okay, great work. So we've got some resources we've laid out there now, and there's a lot there that's in the chat. As Robin said, we'll be sending that out along with the recording. You can also just right now, if you want to grab this, you can click on them and it'll open up your Safari or Chrome or whatever search device you use. Or you can copy it all and paste it into a Word document right now too, if you want access to it right away. So there are ways for you to get the information from the chat box right now. So with that, I think anything else, Kate and Robin, that you want to share? And then what I was going to do is see if we can turn to the fabulous Letty, who's been so great in pasting all this information in for it while we go through this conversation. But I do want to make sure we can get to a few of the questions that are in the Q&A, and I was going to ask Letty to maybe pick a couple of them that Kate, Robin, and I can talk through, and that you too, Letty, can add on to, obviously. But I think what I want to emphasize here is that, as saddened, I mean, I've felt the weight of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's loss, this entirety of these 2 weeks, but that it also is providing me with more energy to continue the fight of what we are working on at AAUW every single day. And so there's never just one fight, friends, and I want to remind us of that. A lot of this, it is in the difference between 2016 and 2020 here is seats of power, and politics has always been about power. So we're not talking about politics here. We're actually talking about how and what we can do to make sure we're advancing equity, not rolling backwards for women and girls. So what we can work on, there's a lot that you heard from Robin already of what we can be doing even in this really uncertain and scary pandemic, to have our voices heard in multiple ways, not just on the Supreme Court appointment, but in so many other ways too. So with that, I mean, get that energy back. We needed to mourn. We will continue to mourn, but we also also need to remember that that badass woman was still planking with her personal trainer and caring for herself up until the very end. So it is on all of us to now stand up and continue to fight for what we believe in. So Letty, tell us a little bit about what's in the Q&A, and then any one of you can kind of step in and talk through some of the ideas or make some comments on some of the questions and comments.
Sure, will do. Thanks a lot, Kim and Kate and Robin. Excellent for all the great information. It's raised up a whole host of questions. So I'm going to start off. There's a handful of constitutional related questions, Kate, that I think you can answer. If it is the president's responsibility to appoint, is it in the Constitution that this appointment is a lifetime appointment?
It is, not in so many words, but yes.
Okay, and if it is the president's constitutional responsibility to appoint, why was Merrick Garland not put forward to the actual nomination process?
So Merrick Garland was nominated by the president at the time, President Obama, and he was not given a hearing by the Senate. So it's the duty of the Senate to advise and consent. Some would argue that they did not uphold their constitutional duty by considering him, but it was up to the Senate to advise and consent, and they did not do that for Merrick Garland.
Great, thank you. There was another question related specifically to Amy Coney Barrett in the fact that 3 years ago she was appointed to her current position. And so because of that, she was in fact vetted. And so some would suggest that because she had already been vetted just 3 years ago, that the speed of this nomination really shouldn't be a concern. How would we respond to that?
First and foremost, in 3 years, a lot can change. And she has a record as a judge now that she did not have 3 years ago. So that should be considered. Again, this is a lifetime appointment. And so it is incumbent upon the 100 senators whose duty it is to advise and consent to assess the record that came before and then the record that she's accumulated these last 3 years to determine, now that they have more information about her job performance and her abilities, whether she's appropriate for this role.
I would also personally add that this is a different job. When you apply for a new job, you're going to be vetted for your entirety of what you bring to that job. So that's my colloquial grassroots advocacy answer. Those senators have the responsibility to vet her for this higher role.
There's a question related just to, there's a lot happening right now as you all correctly stated, the election is underway. There's a lot happening, and in particular, there's a couple of special elections going on that could have an impact on the Senate itself and what the body looks like. Any comments or anything that you can say about the special elections in either Georgia or Arizona, where the makeup of the Senate could potentially change?
Robin, do you want to take that?
I mean, it's a tricky question. It's a tricky situation. That means that it has a tricky answer. Those special elections absolutely could both change the makeup of the Senate, could be involved in Supreme Court cases, as a Supreme Court case. But at the end of the day, our election in 2020 is already underway. Today, yesterday, every day until November 3rd is election day. And for such an important question to be answered by a body that is currently being decided on by the people, to me, does not sit right. This decision should be made by folks who are elected as they're being elected today and tomorrow and in this election. So all of it is at stake. It's not just the special elections that are happening. It's literally every single senator, a Senate seat that is up for election right now. So I just urge everyone to vote and make sure that you understand everything that's at stake with that vote.
And Robin, you offered some really great suggestions about how our members can engage in this process. And this question is really for everybody. Given what we're hearing and seeing, is there anything that can be, it seems that this train is moving, that there's a lot of activity going on. We're working with our coalition partners. Is there anything else outside of what, Robin, you recommended for members to engage, that anything else that can be done to try and stop this train from moving forward?
I think it'd be taking part in every single action that we've outlined and more. That central link with the Just and Fair Supreme Court fight is going to be updated if there's a new action that we can connect you to. But truly taking our roles as members of the society and taking that responsibility seriously and actively is something that everyone can take to heart and act on.
There's a question here about how effective do you think, what we're hearing on the news, you're hearing different things about, some senators have, come out publicly to say that they would not consider this. Others have not necessarily made public statements. We've outlined, how best to contact our senators. Is there anything else in particular that we can do to, again, contacting our senators, anything else that, could potentially have them, change their mind, or, it just seems that everyone's lockstepped into a particular position. Is there anything else that you think might help change senators' opinions?
So I think it just goes to show that we need to be in continuous contact with our elected officials. Remember that you are their boss, and they are responsive and responsible to you. And it is so important that they know and understand your perspective. And you just need to keep being in touch with them and letting them know what you think. And then, as Kim is saying right now, your vote is your voice. So not only do you need to let them know what you think, you need to vote and have that establish what you think. Hold them accountable. And make sure that they are accountable to you.
There are a lot of important races, as we all know, and even if it's not in your state, paying attention to the races going on. There's a lot of really, really important races going on, and we need to know where senators are, both the senators that represent us and the senators in other states, of what they care about and what they believe in, because their voices matter just as much. It's not just the executive office or just the Supreme Court, it's also our representation in Congress, right? Letty, back to you.
Sure. This was a good question. Given the gravitas of a Supreme Court appointment and the lifetime appointment, can you think in the history of the Supreme Court, or even within our recent, history, of anyone being an appointment with 3 years of experience in the judicial appointment?
It used to be much more common for justices to be appointed who came from different backgrounds, who weren't necessarily judges before. I don't off the top of my head know most recently which justice fit that bill, but it used to be a more common practice than it is today.
Yeah, Letty, I'm gonna jump in on one other question. Thank you, Kate, on that. There was a question here about whether or not AAUW is participating in the October 17th Women's March. You may recall that we did participate, and many of us did around the nation, in the January 2017 Women's March. But I'm just going to remind you all, with the pandemic, our staff here in the national office is working very safely and very productively from home. We will continue to do that. Likely until May or June or later of next year, because it's not just a matter of having a vaccine and having access to testing. It's also public health safety issues around the supply chain of the vaccine, and also around public transportation, et cetera. And so we are not going to be loudly demonstrating that we are recommending participation, because we also know a lot of our members might be predisposed to having issues should they contract COVID. So my belief on this is we're in the middle of a pandemic, and if you feel I was able to go down very safely and keep very good distance from crowds that were getting, frankly, really close, even with masks on, at RBG's Candlelight Vigil, and I kept my daughter and my family far back, not within the melee. And I just, as important as all of this is, there's a lot of other ways we can come together without physically being at a march. But I really just urge you all to think about it. I don't think we're going to come out with a very strong statement to participate, because first and foremost, I need to keep our valuable staff safe, and I need to keep and hope that all of you are keeping safe at home too. So just wanted to address that. We have been participating in the past, but where we are right now, first and foremost is your health and your safety.
A question that came up just in terms of process and just in terms of, what, if anything else, the Senate can do. Are there any recourses, procedural actions that the Senate can do to delay this vote from taking place? And anything that we can do as members, as citizens, to raise our voices in regard to some of those procedural issues?
So again, I'll emphasize that these folks, you're their boss. So they just need to hear from you repeatedly and in different ways, through calling, through emailing, through encouraging discourse in your community. The best way to delay this is to uphold what the process should be in and of itself. And that is to provide a full and fair vetting of this nominee, to ask tough questions about what her record looks like and how she will perform as a justice, and conducting that full and fair vetting through one-on-one meetings, through rigorous hearings. If that is done well and done correctly and done in a way that is true to and respectful of the office, that will take time.
So let's take, because we're running out of time here, folks, let's go through, maybe if you want to bucket, Letty, 2 final questions. We'll get to as much of this as we can. And then I really encourage you all, it's not just the Supreme Court. It really is about our grassroots. This year it feels in a lot of ways that everybody always says politics is exceedingly local and vote locally first. This is a time where it is about local, state, and federal. And so there's so much more. Certainly the Supreme Court appointment is critically important, but there are a lot of other just as important areas that we need you in the fight with us on going forward and well into 2021 as well. So Letty, if you can I gave you a little time to try and pull together a couple final ones here as we wrap up our hour.
Right. There's so many really good ones. An interesting question. This question came up a couple different times, but it's interesting because these are lifetime appointments. These have serious consequences. Can a judge with a lifetime appointment be removed? Or Can actions be taken to do so?
A judge can be impeached, much like a president can be impeached. So there is a way to remove a justice, but as you can well imagine, that is a cumbersome and lengthy and in these current times, politically fraught process.
And I think I'm afraid we won't have time to get into this, but there were some questions about other decisions that Judge Barrett has made in regard to other issues, equal protection, LGBTQ, civil rights, etc. We covered 3 very specific buckets that are specific to AAUW. Are there any recommendations that anyone has as far as where to find additional information about her opinions and perspectives on these other issues that we did not cover?
So I'll step in here just for a second, because you all know that at AAUW we don't work just solely, as much as we're exceedingly valued for our commitment to the issues and to our grassroots advocacy, like all of you do as our valuable members and partners in this work. But we're also a part of a coalition. So there are a lot of organizations, human and civil rights organizations, looking at Judge Barrett's history, and her work in all of these issues. We do not, for example, work in gun control, right? So we're not going to be able to espouse on that. We need to stay in our lane of the areas around gender equity for women and girls. And so those are the areas that we're going to really focus in on. But because we are also a part of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, maybe I could actually ask if Nakia, who's on as well, if you don't mind pasting the link to their email address in the chat, that might be helpful. But it's the largest grouping of human and civil rights organizations. We're a member and we're actively engaged in the coalition around all of the different issues that are at stake in this. And so that's another resource for you within the community that can help you to pull together, some additional things that might be important to you in addition to what we're fighting for women and girls. Kate, I don't know if you want to add on anything here.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Kim, and I think that's a great resource. I just also want to add that, as has been pointed out, she has only been on the federal bench for a short period of time. So we can guess at her interpretation on things, but her judicial record is fairly limited. So I only covered what we know to be true of her record. I didn't pontificate about what she might do. So I just want to flag that there are some very important issues that the Supreme Court will likely hear in the coming years that we can guess at how she would react to, but we don't know. Another good place to look is her writings. She's done a fair amount of writing over the course of her career. And she had to fill out a Senate Judiciary questionnaire, which is rather lengthy. I was just looking at it. I think it's about 60 pages. And that is available online. It's very wonky, very detailed, but that outlines many of her writings and cases. And you can use that as sort of a guide to then find more and dig a little bit deeper on her record.
Thanks, Kate. Letty, Kate, Robin, thank you all so much for everything you're doing. This has been fantastic and a really great way of getting us all back to work again on the issues that matter most to all of us at AAUW. There was one question here, was the last one I think that came in, that said, are we still able to advocate on Capitol Hill for all of our mission issues? Look, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but the answer is yes. So it means that, Kate, Robin, Letty, and I are not putting on our 4-inch heels and marching into the House's chambers or the Senate's. But I can tell you your lobby corps, made up of members just like you, are actively working right now. It's just we're doing it all virtually. And friends, we've already learned, you've done it with your family members, you've done it in your branches. We know we can still connect in exceedingly important and human ways, even just by telephone or by this wonderful portal called Zoom that we never all knew we needed in our life as much as we do in 2020. So there is great work going on. And Kate, I don't know if you or Robin want to say, or Letty, say anything more about how we're working right now on the policy and advocacy team to really get this work accomplished when we're not putting on our 3-piece suits and marching down to the Hill.
Well, I want to thank you, Kim, for leading this important discussion, to Letty for facilitating the questions, and Robin for all of your great resources and thinking about this. And I'd like to leave it to Robin to close us out with a call to action and some encouraging words before we head off.
Absolutely. If you go to the AAUW website and look at the 2-minute activist tool, that is the best, most efficient and direct way that AAUW connects you with the Capitol Hill. That it prompts you to send letters based off of our various AAUW public policy priorities, and it is effective. That is one of the ways that we are maintaining that virtual connection. So I look forward to connecting with each of you, whether you're a new activist or you are experienced and have already been a part of this community. And I really appreciate everyone being here today.
All right, with that, I am literally typing to some of you members right now in here with a couple more of your answers that you were asking for, but all of this is being recorded. As a reminder, you can find it on the, not today, because we have to allow Zoom to collect all of this, and it'll be posted in a few days, up on the membership tab on which is in the right corner of the main AAUW.org, and also on our 2020 convening page. Both of those links are listed in the chat. My friend Nikia put those up for you earlier, and we will make sure and send all of these resources and those links out to everybody who participated today and all of our active members around the country, because we want you and need you to get to work with us. Let's get to it. Thank you all for being with us today. Huge thanks to my friends and colleagues, Kate, Letty, and Robin, and to the wonderful Nikia for allowing us all to be together here today. I'm energized. I hope all of you are too. See you again soon. Bye-bye.